The world of Clair Obscur is saturated with references and Easter eggs that inspired the in-game mechanics and story, with art, painting, and culture being the primary muses the developers drew inspiration from. This broader web of references opens the door for obsessive fans, definitely not referring to myself here, to go down labyrinthian rabbit holes at 3 in the morning to track down the hidden meanings and story implications behind just about every feature in the game. There's dozens of details in this beautifully crafted world I'd like to dive into, and we'll talk about many of them, but first thing I want to talk about here is Chroma. Two quick disclaimers before we go further. This video will contain story spoilers, so proceed with caution. Also, the devs have explicitly stated that the story is intended to be left vague so that players can fill in the gaps with their own imaginations. I'll be talking about this topic from the perspective of my own research and theories, but please remember that this is just that, a theory. There is no single right or wrong answer, and I'd love to hear your own theories and whether you agree or disagree with my conclusions in the comments. So you'll know by now that Chroma is not only the in-game currency, but it's also the source of life and power within the canvas. But what exactly is it? To answer that question, let's cover what we know from within the game, and then I'll zoom out to examine the broader strokes of real-world context and potential lore implications of this mysterious source of power. So what do we know for sure about Chroma so far? Chroma is the painter's medium of power. It is quite literally paint, just magical, life-giving paint that can be used to create and destroy entire pocket dimensions. Someone seriously needs to pitch this business opportunity to Blick Art Materials. Everything living inside the canvas is made up of chroma. It is essentially the equivalent of someone's soul or essence. When the inhabitants of the canvas die, excluding those erased by the gamage, their chroma is released and transferred back to the paintress, which is why Painted Renoir kills expeditioners, to empower Aline and keep the canvas world intact. However, if someone is killed by a Nevron, their chroma is trapped inside their body. You'll also notice that the corpses of expeditioners killed by Nevrons are essentially trapped in stasis and completely desaturated, which I'll circle back to in a bit. Extended exposure to, or use of chroma can cause the wielder to become physically sick, so there's likely some level of toxicity inherent to this medium that a painter must learn to manage. Although it's not clear whether this illness is only associated with time spent inside a canvas, or the use of chroma in general. We can see the effects of this chroma sickness on the faces of Aline, Renoir, and Clea during the flashback scene in Alicia's epilogue. Renoir also stresses to Aline that it's too soon for her to re-enter a canvas after she's expelled by the team. He says that she'll die if she doesn't take time to heal from her prolonged exposure. Interestingly, when the Gestrals die, their chroma doesn't return to the paintress. It's recycled back into the Sacred River to be reincarnated as a new Gestral. This would suggest that Verso's original creations before he died were somehow immortalized. Chroma particles can be extracted from dead Nevrons and used to carve symbols onto skin or weapons, as we can see on Lune's face and Gustave's gun. These runic carvings are called pictos and can be used to enhance combat abilities, albeit in a limited manner. Thanks to Gustave, Expedition 33 has a device called the Lumina Converter, which can extract chroma in a more pure form so that the wielder can inherently perform the functions of a pictos without being limited by the runic trappings normally required to attune to these abilities. Functionally, in-game, this is how player characters can equip and learn new abilities as they progress. As a huge Arcane fan, it was really interesting to me to see the parallels drawn between the magic system of Clair Obscur and how magic and hextech develops throughout the show. There's a moment in Season 1, Episode 5, when Victor has a revelation about the application of runes.
What if we've been looking at it backwards? We've been trying to discover runes that invoke specific effects and then molding them to a useful function. Tools, as you like to put it. But, if the legends are true, mages aren't bound to single functions. It's said the arcane speaks through them. They think. They adapt.
Now, obviously, there's plenty of magic systems in the broader world of sci-fi and fantasy that are similar, so there's no real confirmation that this was an inspiration or a parallel. But since my brain chemistry pretty much looks like this these days, this was the first comparison that I drew. I was only able to find limited information online about how magic powers work in the novel that was officially confirmed to have inspired the story of Expedition 33, La Horde du Contrevent, translated to The Horde of the Counterwind in English, due to the lack of official English translation of the book. However, it does seem that there is a similar system of limited magic powers used by the protagonists that are comparably weaker to the divine powers central to the main plot conflict. But anyway, now that I've found yet another excuse to talk about Arcane, I digress. Okay, so we've covered the basics, so now I'm gonna get into some of the real-world references that I've tracked down and the ensuing theories I've developed. The game draws heavily on artistic terms to inform the names and functions of various elements of the game, and this case is no different. In art, Chroma references the purity or saturation of a color. Think of it as paint fresh from a tube. The more you mix it with other paints, the less pure the color becomes until it eventually becomes a muddied shade of gray or chromatic black. This means that its chroma value has been lowered. When we extrapolate that definition to chroma in-game, this is a very clear reference to the power source of the painters being a strong, pure form of mana. Similarly, lumina and pictos are also terms derived from art. Lumina, of course, means light, and in art, lightness describes the amount of visible light that is reflected back to our eyes and determines how much of a color we can see. Light and chroma are two concepts that are intrinsically related. If you think of the color sliders used to pick a color on the computer, when the light or value and saturation sliders are turned all the way up, the resulting shade is the most vivid, pure form of that color. All right, so are you seeing the connection to intensity of power within the Clair Obscur world yet? When it comes to pictos, this is most likely a reference to the term pictogram, which is a highly simplified line art drawing that conveys a subject. So quite literally, when residents of the canvas carve pictos, they're carving tiny pictograms. So it also makes sense that pictos are a simplified, less powerful form of magic. It's essentially diluted chroma. So after deep diving on essentially a beginner's fine art lesson, I was left with some theories, questions, and revelations. I mentioned coming back to the Nevron victims that we see throughout the game. Every single one of their corpses is frozen in a flat shade of dark gray. Given what we learned about chroma and light, I believe that this was an intentional design choice referencing the fact that chroma is trapped and diluted. When Mael extracts the chroma from the fallen expeditioners in Act 3, she comments on the fact that it's not pure chroma. Essentially, it's been desaturated or diluted by the Nevrons, meaning she needed a lot more of it in order to be able to access her powers fully. And of course, I've got to throw my own spinfoil hat theory in here. After researching this topic, I've been led to believe that it may be possible for creations inside the canvases to learn to become painters themselves. Now, hear me out. As we progress through the game, we learn to wield stronger and stronger luminas, we defeat stronger enemies as our powers grow, and the chroma that's dropped from those enemies increases exponentially. Now, of course, this is a standard in-game mechanic to increase the power and rewards of player characters, but my own headcanon leads me to believe that the stronger a character becomes, the closer they get to being able to wield pure chroma. Going back to my comparison of Arcane, I believe that it is extremely likely that there is a possibility for someone who is quote-unquote mortal to become adept enough with pictos and luminas to become a mage, or in this case, a painter themselves. But I have to wonder if that person's fate would parallel Victor's. Is it inevitable that the closer you draw to divinity, the farther you're removed from those you leave behind? And I suppose that's the ultimate question we're left with in this story. What makes someone real, or mortal, or divine? Are we merely defined by the power that we wield, or the power that's wielded over us? Is each unique form of power limited by a strict set of rules, or is it limited only by the power of someone's inner strength? Is that which we deem real only real because someone believed in it so wholeheartedly as to make it so? Obviously, these questions go way beyond the scope of the game, and there is no single real answer, but I think it's an interesting thought experiment to explore about our own self-imposed limitations. This theory is supported and feeds into the even wilder theory I have about canvases inside canvases and the possibility of an endless network of pocket dimensions, but that's a topic that I'll save for my next video. Hopefully this gave you a clearer idea of what chroma actually is within the world of Clair Obscur, and maybe gave you a few existential questions to ponder. So what do you think? Could Lune, Ciel, and all the other canvas creations evolve into painters themselves someday? Do you think chroma can evolve and adapt inside the canvas worlds? I'd love to hear your theories and insights in the comments. As always, thank you so much for watching and making it to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this content, make sure to check out my other videos on Expedition 33 and beyond. And if you really enjoyed it, I would love if you wanted to come hang out with us on stream or in Discord, and all of those links can be found in the description below. Until next time, remember, tomorrow comes, and for those who come after. Take care.